You got into you went on this person Nice Mangoes podcast.
Yeah, that talk about a no good deed going unpunished.
There's just something.
I did my best to launch your podcast.
There's something wrong with that account because there's many ways in which it seems quite reasonable.
Yeah, and then it degraded into mental illness.
Well, there's a personal nastiness about it that just doesn't let up.
Yeah,
and a lack of charity. And what I find is that there are certain things I can do to slow down that kind of negative experience. And then there are certain diehard actors, some of whom are quite polite and charming and funny, who just will not, like, their thing is they will ride this to the most negative place if they can get there. And that sub-community, I've been talking about in terms of, we have diversity and inclusion, which I'm willing to say is a good thing. And then it needs a different function, which is interoperability and exclusion, because there's certain people who can't be at the table for a conversation if it's going to progress, because their interest is in derailing it. Now, I got into some weird thing just now. Do you know the singer Billy Bragg?
No.
He's like a progressive, he's kind of like a punk Arlo Guthrie, or Woody Guthrie, rather. And like, he turns out he wrote a book, and he's talking about Eric Weinstein, an investment banker who is a free speech, champion, won't meet with, I don't know, he's got a whole story in his mind. And
so he took a shot at you in his book?
He went on Sam Cedar's program.
Oh, well, there's a venue that is not going to select for
honest
opinions.
I spoke to Sam. Look, there's a problem with the Saul Alinsky thing where Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals.
Rules for Radicals.
The focus on ridicule. I think it's hard to remember, like, Country Joe and the Fish was ridiculing a bad war in terms that are ridiculous. You've now got a group of people who, if a mathematician says, that in different arithmetics, you could have an equation like 2 + 3 = 1. And so then you get somebody saying, well, I don't know what they're smoking over there at Princeton, but well, that's ridicule, but you're ridiculing something that you strawmanned and didn't understand,
right? Because
the person actually was making sense. And so what I see is that the left, and in particular the Sam Cedar crowd, has doing that with abandon. Well, it's willing to do two separate things. Sam is quite willing. Like, there's this whole thing about, will you talk to Sam Cedar? Will you debate Sam Cedar? And my feeling is, I would debate part of Sam Cedar, the part that just is focused on the ideas, but the part that is kind of like nasty and ridiculing and doing the Alinsky thing, I don't know what to do with it. I'm not interested in it. I've spoken to Sam Cedar on the phone. It's perfectly reasonable, made sense to me. We disagreed on positions, but...
Well, the line that gets crossed for me always with these guys, and again, it's disproportionately on the left, is the line of conscious dishonesty. I mean, it's your brother's aphorism: bad faith changes everything.
Bad faith changes everything.
And I mean, these guys are in bad faith. They know they're lying about, in my case, my views, my actual beliefs, and
not all of them.
There's just too much information.
Well, David Pakman.
No, David Pakman's fine. I just did his podcast.
Yeah, I know. But David Pakman said some pretty non-charitable things in some parts that seemed kind of ridiculing. And
of me?
I think me, other people.
Well, I have never seen him misrepresenting my views. And I think that, I don't know him. I just did his podcast once, but he seems like somebody who, if I said, listen, you got me wrong here, that would matter, and he would make an effort to get me right.
And that's the thing, which is the problem that we have increasingly is that the tactics that are being used in what are called progressive circles have been confused with the content. So that is, the objections to the vehicle, which might be Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, is conflated with the
totally unethical program for smearing people dishonestly.
Well, it's an immoral technology.
Well, no, it's an ends justify the means.
That's the big problem on the left.
Yeah. So, but that ethic is flawed. right? So for instance, I mean, like with me and Trump, like there's nobody who
you don't like the guy.
Denigrates Trump as avidly as I do, but I am super careful, to be honest. Right. So it's not that anything you can smear him with is fair.
Because
right?
You can be, Sam. I mean, the problem with
all these guys can be. Sam Cedar can be honest on his show and still have a show. Right. Nobody's going to cancel him because he was too honest.
No, I think that there's like this very weird other. I mean, I don't want to get into the Sam Cedar thing in particular. First of all, because he's going to do an entire show. We know you.
That's right. No doubt. Yeah. He'll take these quotations and
but he has he has Pacman's ability to reason. I mean,
this is the banality of evil, right? Like, there's not that many evil people, right? There's just a lot of people who are functioning in some normal mode with normal incentives, and they become assholes because they're not heroes, right? But so like it takes some work not to be an asshole when you are incentivized to be one, and we're all vulnerable to this. But there's some people who have just cashed in to. Go for it.
That nonsense on the left makes me crazy because in part it just feels like all of my ideals turned into some piece of crap.
We're of the left.
Not only the left, man. I came from a farther left part than I don't even know where you started. But
I've never been tempted to be anything other than a Democrat. I've never even said I'm going to be an independent because the Democratic Party isn't me.
If I could move to another party that made sense, I'd do it at this point. Anyway, I think that what we don't really understand is that there's a homelessness problem that is really significant. If you are the sort of a person who needs to attach to some kind of institutional structure in a time when there is no institution that actually holds your perspective, you're going to start to do very bizarre things. Now, the thing about you and me is that to some extent, and I don't think we can do this long term, we're okay with being homeless. Right? You can sort of first principles, try to think your way out of stuff. But it's very tough for most people. And I think that there are these sort of collection points in the adaptive landscape of politics. Would you disagree with that?
Yeah. Well, one thing that seems important is the connection to science. I mean, we're not spending a lot of time talking about science in this mode, but the dispassion and self-criticism that is the only rubric under which real science can be done bleeds into our thinking about all these other issues. I mean, I think that's got to be a relevant variable. It's like you either have a scientific cast of mind or you don't, and when you don't,
I have both.
Right, but when you don't, you're not seeing the. You're not even seeing intellectual dishonesty for what it is, right? It's just like motivated reasoning isn't a bad thing, right? Wishful thinking isn't a bad thing. Confirmation bias isn't a bad thing. These are virtues. This is in religion. This is faith, right? This is
Well, this is like always the issue with our friend Jordan Peterson, which is that when he gets really far out there in the, I don't know, people now call mythopoetic. I don't know the lingo.
Yeah.
You always wonder, are you still maintaining a fact-checking ability to bring you back to earth? And so as long as those two facilities are present and in dialogue, and as long as the fact-checking, what we call the scientific method is in some sense inadequate to me to explain how science has progressed.
Right.
All the mad thinking and then the spirituality of coming up with breaking new ground doesn't happen. You just
gave us Ramanujan about an hour ago. Yeah. So he's having dreams about the goddess Lakshmi handing him theorems.
Well, there's that, the Carolus school of astronomy that came up with infinite series before Newton and Leibniz was doing it in religious poetry. It rhymed, I think, over there in Kerala. So there is a kind of madness that you have to invite to break new ground, and there's a kind of sanity that you have to invite to wrestle with the madness. And our friend Dan Barkay came up with this idea that science is a two-front war, but that most people have only been deployed to one front. And I think that's a really nice image. I do worry that in part the activist mindset, particularly on the left, has a very clear idea, which is that, it's really a shame the number of people who have to get hurt for justice to be done.
Right.
And that is a highly conserved idea that I had not understood was broadly distributed.
Yeah. But I mean, that is an ethic or a pseudo ethic that we have to just relentlessly criticize, because it's so much harm gets done. I mean, that is the thinking that allows good people or otherwise good people to create immense harm. It's like, let's throw them off the rooftops because they the purge is on, and it's sorry we have to break these many eggs to make this omelet.
But partially the question is, how do we spend enough time together to get past this problem? Like, I really think it's quite serious that. Well,
part of it is that we're not actually doing much of this face to face, right? Like, I've never met Nassim, I've never met Sam Seder, I've never met it. I mean, they shouldn't have been in the same sentence. They have very different problems. But if before any of this had happened, I mean, Sam Seder, I think, has done probably a dozen shows. Or I mean, I'm always getting, someone's always sending me a video that he's made that I don't watch, but I log the fact that there's yet another export from his world where he's attacked me. If I had lunch with him before any of this he ever took an interest in me, there might have been a very different effect.
That's why I had a phone call with him.
It's the fact we've never, this is why anchor to civility. And Nassim is a friend of yours, so there's a kind of a loyalty effect, or just a fact, you have a different relationship to his flaws, knowing him as a person. And the same things happened to me, like the fact that I've hung out with Jordan or Ben Shapiro.
Well, you saw what happened with Claire. Let's talk about the Claire situation.
Okay, that would have been different had you never hung out with Claire. Or it might have been different.
No, I think there was a more serious issue, and it just didn't.
To flip it around, it was more of a betrayal, or a seeming betrayal, given the fact that you had hung out together. It wasn't just coming over the transom.
Betrayal, in part, was my betrayal of Claire. I just didn't know it.
Well, whatever. I'm just saying the dynamics change if you know each other. Right? I'm
trying to make a different point.
Right.
When somebody behaves in a way that is very most unexpected, like what I try to do is I try to slow it down. I say, I bet we're watching two different movies.
Yeah.
And your story and my story the gears are not lining up. And so if we just push on the gears, the teeth are going to pop off and it'll be the end of everything. And so with Claire, what I tried to figure out is, why are you repeatedly sort of coming at me? Do you need to burnish your credentials that you're objective, that you don't have tribalist loyalty? That was one set of issues. But there was another issue, which is this, that Nassim had gone after Claire and I was silent. I didn't want to get involved in it. I didn't like the way Nassim was going about doing what he was doing. Absolutely couldn't take it. Didn't like it. Detested it. On the other hand, I have a particular bug in my bonnet about IQ and race, which is that I think it's an absolutely dangerous topic that's being explored in a really bad way, even by good people.
Right.
And that in part, IQ has this curse that I've said it's a pretty good measure of intelligence. It would be much better if it was obviously terrible or really terrific. But it's in exactly the wrong place, that it does tell us something about intelligence and not nearly enough. So you can be a genius with low IQ.
Right.
That problem, was being teased out, and neither of them, the reason I stayed out of it is just, I didn't believe in Claire's position as I understood it. And I didn't believe in Nassim's tactics as I understood them. And Claire interpreted that, I think, and I don't know this to be true, as, wow, you're seeing me getting mauled.
Right.
And I thought you would be there, or something like that. And so in part, just backing up everything, slowing it down, trying to listen. Ben and I have gotten sideways a few times. To his credit, every time I take something to Ben Shapiro, he'll think better of himself, and he'll come.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's my experience as well.
Even though red meat is part of his business model.
Yeah. No, that counts for a lot. So the place where we've reached some kind of bad faith singularity,
right,
is where I think, okay, there's we just have to cut our losses. There's no conversation. That's why I would never talk to Sam Seder in a public forum. He's proven himself so committed to the singularity. I mean, it's like there's a bunch. There's maybe 20 people who are just on this part of the landscape where there's no coming back from it. I mean, obviously there's an appropriate, any conversation that would have to happen would have to begin with an actual apology. I'm like, it's just so bad. There's no alternate movie version that's exculpatory, right? These people know they're lying. They're avidly lying. It's all malicious. It's all Saul Alinsky. It's all just smear.
Well, it is Saul Alinsky,
right.
But the best that can be said for it, again, I don't get along with it,
right,
is I believe that they think that they're in desperate times, and they believe that desperate times call for desperate measures. And that's sort of the mindset, which is the ridicule is necessary to stop a greater evil. And that entitlement, as soon as you start experimenting.
But ridicule is not the problem. It's the line that's the problem. It's right. You can if it's an honest joke at somebody's expense.
I've probably watched 45 minutes of Sam Cedar total.
Yeah, well, that's more than I've watched, but I've watched enough to know that these are people who, when they're trafficking in audio of my podcast that's been edited to show the opposite of what I was saying, and they get 1,000 blistering comments telling them about this, they keep the audio up, or they don't. Well, they never correct an error.
I agree, but that's what's coming out of it.
That's psychopathic behavior. It's like whether or not they're psychopaths, they're acting like.
All right, but then we've got a giant chunk of our world, and in part a lot of the sense-making apparatus that is explicitly amongst itself psychopathic. It believes that it is under threat in desperate times, and desperate times call for desperate measures. This is its opportunity, and it's going to do things, and it's going to be. The thing that I didn't understand about it, because I came from the left, is that it just explicitly thinks in, that's too bad.
Right.
I'll get you a Kleenex next. It's just this dead cold-heartedness that progress requires that good people get hurt. Boo-hoo. And that thing is so hardcore.
That's going to make that makes the Trumpian backlash understandable.
Right? And that's really in part what I'm trying to get at, which is that when I went to Washington in like 1996 on immigration issues, I went into some staffers, like some warren of cubicles, and I saw this sign on one of the cubicles that said, if it's worth fighting for, it's worth fighting dirty for.
Right.
And I came to understand that if you wanted to survive and thrive and get stuff done in Washington, that had been absorbed almost universally.
Right.
And then once I realized that, I had to make a decision. Did I really want to get good things done, or did I want to stay a person I could live with? And that's very painful to actually have to think about.
Yeah, but I think that is an easy choice, or should be. We want to create a world where that's an easy choice. Right?
We want to create a world in which that's an easy choice. What we've created is a system of selective pressures, which may actually end up selecting for that over and over again. And you don't realize, and this is the issue. The reason that so many of these things make me angry, like the Great Moderation, or the abuse of the immigration system to decrease wages, and then you cry xenophobia when somebody points it out, or NAFTA, and large areas of the country get really hurt, and you're saying that everybody's going to be made better off, is that all of these things I can see in real time. Like right now, what I can see, like those things of the past, is I can see this weird, and this is getting back to the Jeff Epstein thing. There is a deliberate attempt not to talk about the intelligence community and its links to Jeffrey Epstein. And it is clear, and it's a very short proof, because assume that he had no links to the intelligence community, like none whatsoever. Somehow a member of the Trilateral Commission, affiliated with Rockefeller University, Harvard, no links to any intelligence community anywhere in the world. You could sell papers debunking the claims that people want to know, which is, how is this guy tied in with the intelligence community? Right?
So you're saying it's fishy that no one's doing that?
Well, I mean, it's beyond fishy. In other words, you have something that everybody's demanding and wants. If it weren't true, you could get paid by showing that it's not true, or making the best argument possible, or making fun of how thin the claims are.
Well, that may yet happen. I mean, I don't know that somebody isn't writing the 5,000 word Atlantic article on Epstein that's going to answer.
Dude, how long has it been? This guy supposedly commits suicide. We don't know whether, what branch of the decision tree that's on. And you can search, go to the New York Times and search on intelligence. The thing and Epstein, like, it's not being explored. It's not being shut down. It's like anechoic tile in your echolocating. It's not what you're hearing. Go to the search bar and search for things that people are discussing that don't come up. And that's what's telling you that there's something this guy was apparently a serious sexual predator. We're in an era of Me Too.
Right. But there are anomalies like that. I mean, the clear anomaly for me was, and it's one for which I don't have any sinister explanation. I just think it's an anomaly of the news cycle we're in.
Right.
It's sort of what Trump has done to our information diet. When the Las Vegas shooting, right, perpetrated by a man whose name I don't even know, right? And I'm kind of a student of these things, but I never even took the time to learn the guy's name. I think many press reports decided to not use his name. No, but this was the biggest shooting in American history.
Right.
Right. And 48 hours later, nobody was talking about it.
Well, now, that's not true.
That's like it had fallen out of the news cycle and never came back in.
It vanished very quickly. But
I don't think there's any reason why it vanished apart from the fact that we just don't have the bandwidth for it anymore. It's like there was no link that made it clearly ideological. I mean, nothing surfaced. He wasn't a clear white supremacist or he wasn't a jihadist. I mean, there was no.
You remember the word bump stock?
Yeah. Yeah. So the bump stock.
Okay. So why weren't we talking about bump stock?
Yeah. So we banned bump stocks as a result of that thing, and that's the legacy of that atrocity. But if you had told me at any point beforehand that on whatever day of the week it was, you're going to have the biggest mass shooting in American history by far, and it was going to be a fairly cinematic one, right? I mean, it's like you're talking about shooting out from the windows of a.
Did you see Dan Bilzerian was at this thing?
Oh no! I think
Dan Bilzerian is running out of this thing, saying like, "We're under fire. I'm going to go get my gun," and he's doing it in real time.
If you told me we're not going to be talking about this a week later, right? That just wouldn't compute. But that is the situation we're in. I mean, somehow it just didn't survive the Darwinian contest with whatever else was on social media.
I don't really think that that's what happens.
Well, so then why aren't we talking about it?
Well, that's see, look, and you're starting to smile. Yeah. No, this is the thing that conspiracy theorists get dead wrong, which is you are allowed to notice some very weird anomaly and not have to say what it is you're noticing. Right? So my claim, like,
but you don't buy my explanation, which is because there was not an immediate purchase on a larger story of motive, and this guy, it was just not a lot of information came out about this guy that was salient. It just we're so deluged by other stuff, most of it Trumpian.
Correct. You're not correct in my opinion.
Okay,
so let me
that's interesting. So
so the way I would say it,
but whoever's right or wrong, I'm just saying that this belief that I now have. That we have a different relationship to information now. In recent years.
We can agree that we're cycling through things very quickly, but that was a spectacular. There's a reason we're talking about it.
It was amazing, yeah.
Because it's anomalously weird how fast that story disappeared.
Oh yeah.
Now, one of the things that we have to talk about in that realm is Dana Boyd and her discussion of strategic silence. So that's your search string people playing along at home. Strategic silence is a doctrine of some kind that says that news media should not report the news because of its potential impact.
And where was this articulated?
You should check out Data and Society, which is a particularly interesting organization which fingered our friends as the alternative influencer network.
Oh, right.
And Dana Boyd, who I believe is sort of in our circles, in the tech circles, starts talking about the need for strategic silence.
A girl Dana or a boy Dana?
A female.
Okay.
Somebody I perceive to be female.
Yeah, I don't.
Dana. I now don't want to touch.
Yeah. Okay.
A human named Dana Boyd.
Right.
And strategic silence. And she also talks about data gaps, if I'm not mistaken, if I have my terminology right. And so then you have to look at things like style guides, like the AP style guide or the New York Times style guide, which is the way in which people are directed to report news stories. Is there a danger of copycat killings? So there may be a body of thought around what does one do around mass shootings so that we don't have future mass shootings. Yeah. Or if this is particularly exciting to certain people, should we publish the manifesto? So as you start to understand what the meta rules around these things are, some of those could be innocent.
Well, I think some are better than innocent. I think some are benign, and we've been slow to adopt them. I think the fact that I don't know this guy's name is probably a good thing for the world, and that was part of the new style guide. You just don't.
Did you read the New Zealand shooters manifesto?
No, but I part of it. But yeah, I haven't read the whole thing. No.
So that.
But
what I don't want is somebody saying we should not read we should criminalize reading the New Zealand Shooters Manifesto. But by the way, let me tell you, he told us all that Candace Owens was his inspiration.
Right.
Because that's not what the shooter did. So now
no one wants to criminalize it. I'm just saying that you.
No. I'm saying something much more disturbing.
It's appropriate for journalists to worry that merely shining a light, pointing a camera at this new atrocity is should be the default setting, right? Like, name the guy, let's go get into his story, let's find out why he did it, and do all of this in public.
We're in such a much more dangerous place, in my opinion. But
maybe we're talking past each other here. It's just that we've been very slow to realize that the part of the mimetic contagion here is the copycat effect, the fact that people in their own perverse way, these people are being martyred and lionized just by the mere sharing of this information about them.
Let's agree that in a better world, we would have a situation by which we would not want to communicate
we want to make these people famous.
We don't.
Fame is part of the motive, right? Posthumous fame even is part of the motive. So, and it's even if it's not part of the motive, it's part of what is attractive to the living, aspiring gunman.
Well, so first of all, let me steel man your position to make sure I'm getting it, and then I can take issue with you, and we'll see whether I'm adding or subtracting.
Right.
I think what you're saying is that because of the information quality and the fame quality and the inspirational quality to copycat killers, that communicating the information that somebody wished to communicate, provided they're willing to make a down payment in terms of dead bodies taken, lives taken out of this world.
I'm not even focused on the manifesto. I'm focused on just naming the person.
Okay. You're sympathetic at some level with the concept of strategic silence.
Yeah.
I would be sympathetic with the concept of strategic silence if I trusted the people who are supposed to manage it. But I'm trying to get to the next layer, which
I understand that concern. Yeah.
I am very concerned that the people who are enthusiastic about strategic silence are interested in telling us partial information about all of these things so that we cannot actually tell what the hell just happened.
Well, yeah. So you just changed the topic to jihadism, and we're perfectly in agreement because, yes, they will elide the religious identity of perpetrators in various contexts and actually hide information from us, right? So they'll
correct.
You'll see something happen. The media will pretend it's inexplicable, right? Like the Orlando shooting. It's like maybe this guy was it was his repressed homosexuality that was the problem, right? And yet those who have a little bit of information recognize that this is a clear-cut case of jihadism and indoctrination and a spread of and the consequences of certain ideas. And the analogous situation on the other side would be, what if we were going to systematically conceal evidence of white supremacy being the motive for a certain
But what
attack,
I'm trying to say is that in all of these killings, like you just pointed out that the Unabomber, you reread the Unabomber's manifesto.
Right.
Now, the Unabomber wrote a story called Ship of Fools, which I thought was relatively interesting, about people losing their heads in social justice and society getting scuttled.
There's some of that in the manifesto too.
Yep.
I mean, he's very critical of
he's
the
not
left
a dumb man,
that
Kaczynski guy.
Yeah.
However, the point is that you were able to mine that for information, and then you were able to reach some pretty interesting conclusions about where Kaczynski was relative to society in general. You trusted yourself.
Right.
Okay. My guess is that when it comes to jihadis, you are more interested in communicating the information about what the motivational structure is because it is prescriptive that something might be done. However, it is also
actually there's another reason. It's not just that it's prescriptive. It may not be. It's just that there's more contact between.
There are more levers to play with to try to control the situation.
And it's a much larger problem.
No kidding. Yeah. Right. But on the other hand, if I look at the New Zealand shooters and the Squirrel Hill shooters manifestos,
right,
it's disgusting and it has content.
Yeah.
And, the way in which I can explain to people how all of the open border type stuff is going to cause future problems is just to say, you may not think of a country the way I do or somebody else, but imagine that somebody comes to your home as a guest and you give them the key and they say, I hope you don't mind, but I noticed that there were a lot of people on Skid Row today who didn't have anything to eat, no place to sleep. So I ran off 2,000 copies of your key. And I hope we can adopt all those people when they come over later tonight because I gave them the address and the security code. Now, if that starts to rattle around in your brain, you don't feel good about it. You may not conceive of your country as a house with a front door and a security code and rules as to who gets in and out, but they do. And some of those people are going to go crazy and they're going to kill people. And I know that to be the case. And it's not that I'm sympathetic with a synagogue shooter or a mosque killer. Fuck those guys. The point is that we are not trying to get the information because we have this class of people, this intermediating class that I don't trust as far as I can throw them and that you still have more residual trust in. In other words, my feeling about data in society is that I understand all sorts of things that they're trying to do, but they're super dangerous. They are incredibly dangerous in part because they're going to be backed by people like Bill and Melinda Gates.
Yeah,
or the Ford Foundation, or whatever it is.
This is the Southern Poverty Law Center problem.
Exactly,
and other guys. Yeah, so it's I think you and I have been talking past each other a little bit here.
All right,
I totally agree that in this case we can't really trust the gatekeepers. The only thing that I was expressing open-mindedness about or agreement about with respect to strategic silence is there is this.
I would trust you to do strategic silence, Sam.
Well, in some ways, it's impossible. It's like take it out of the
because
atrocity.
You know that.
Yeah, but there's the atrocity side of it, which is its own thing. But just take the case of famous suicides, right? We know that suicide is contagious, right? And this has a name, the Werther effect, based on Goethe's novel, The Sorrows of Young Werther. So there's the fact that a sufficiently prominent person who's got any kind of, especially, and this is true, I think, for any suicide, but especially if there's some sort of Byronic, romantic gloss that can be put on it, suicides go up, and suicides go up in ways that are, horrific. But plane crashes go up. Right. And we believe, I don't know if the data has changed on this, but as of, 20 years ago or whenever this was done, I think this was in, might have been in Cialdini's book, Influence. The plane crashes go up, and the interpretation of that is that some number of airline pilots commit suicide with everyone on board. Right. We know that's happened before. There's one famous case of that, but it just out of the statistics that seems to be suggested. But so, what do you do when Anthony Bourdain commits suicide? How do you cover that story? There has to be some style guide around how you cover it, and it's not. And at one point, it could look like an unwillingness to actually get at the truth, but what's actually motivating you is not an unwillingness to get at the truth. It's just you're aware of the potential contagion effect here, depending on what the actual story is.